The world is changing dramatically around us, and humans are the cause of much of this. We have pollution, we have mismanagement, we have climate change. But at the same time, although this topic is so crucial and is supported by the Sustainable Development Goals and the UN, who say we should leave no one behind in our journey towards a more sustainable future, in our education, I think we are leaving people behind. So despite this topic being so crucial, we still often teach it in a very traditional way in terms of passive learning. And what this means is that we lose our students often because they become disengaged. If we leave people behind, they cannot be champions for a more sustainable future. Experiential education is what we need to adopt. Virtual reality provides that beautiful opportunity for us to really engage our learners, to help them understand the nuances and complexities of scenarios of sustainability and climate change by taking them into the space where these things really matter without having to travel, and to learn from those people there about what their concerns are about sustainability. So we need to make more use of virtual reality for sustainability education, because the students we have today are the leaders of the future, and they will take us to that future if they're truly deeply educated on what is happening around us. This project has been very well received. We have now got 2 learning tools, one in Peru, one in Fiji, that are both being used widely. And this has had a big impact because 2,500 students around the world have now used this in Canada, in Vanuatu, as well as in New Zealand. And we hope that this will continue to make a great contribution towards that sustainable future that we all want. So thank you very much for... Firstly, thank you very much for having me here. And I have to admit, I feel so 2019 because I'm not talking about AI. I'm going to talk about some of that other technology that we can embrace for learning. And also, when looking at that video, it's always a bit awkward looking at a video of yourself. But at a time when we were really working on creating this project and really thinking about what was happening around us, the impacts of climate change were more pronounced in the Pacific Islands, close to where we are. So I'm based in Wellington, in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That's no longer the case. We feel climate change very effectively and very clearly around us in Wellington. So that's just a bit of a context. But essentially, we wanted to change how we teach sustainability and climate change. And hopefully that comes through in the video. And it's about building emotional connections with other people. And for us, for the team, it was particularly important to connect our learners with indigenous communities and also to celebrate Pacifica culture. So the learning tool to Fiji is the first learning tool we developed. And we do have a lot of Pacifica learners, and their culture to be celebrated, and their knowledge and their cultural values to be celebrated in this way is something that also has a real impact in the classroom, because we're not just relying on Western ways of viewing things, and we're not there to just solve problems for the poor natives. I would like to think it's a very different approach. What about you, Levent?
What about me? Okay, hi, everyone. I'm very glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this wonderful conference. Now, I'm from Wharton Interactive. Wharton Interactive is part of Wharton Business School, where we are trying to democratize and transform learning. That's the goal. And this journey started about 10 years ago, where Wharton was two people that I have to mention here is Sarah Toms and Ethan Malik, two crazy people that came 10 years ago saying, we're still sitting in front of the classroom and trying to teach these students, and are they learning? The answer was, we don't know. So they said, what can we do to change this? How can we make sure we are now connecting in different levels with the students, which I would call student-centric approach, as opposed to faculty approach, sorry, faculty, but I get this everywhere, wherever I go, and how we can get them to learn faster. And not only learn faster, but how we can ask them to apply. So with that in mind, they created Wharton Interactive, and 4 years ago, we started the Wharton Interactive platform called Alternative Reality Courseware Platform. It's based on simulations, based on Wharton faculty, and the goal is to democratize and as well as change how students, or for that matter, lifelong learners are learning. And I'll give you a little bit more into it. I'm a non-native digital, so I've learned how to do this. Anybody can do it. So I'm going to be here to share that information with you. What's the challenge?
Oh, right, we're on to that. I was going to talk a little bit more about how I use it.
I'll talk. I'll let you go.
Thank you. So this is, of course, my little focus piece. But while I invite any of you to have a go after the presentation, if you do want to go to Machu Picchu, which is what we've got on here, Machu Picchu Pueblo, we also went through the same process. At one stage, we had a big grant for cutting-edge technology to roll it out in schools. And the trial was very interesting. We learned a lot from it. But the key thing we learned is VR as a technology is very powerful, but VR headsets are problematic. And we learned from it and wound it right back to Windows computers, Apple computers, and then Chromebooks, because what do people use in schools? If they have access to digital devices, they have Chromebooks, certainly in New Zealand and Australia. So basically the cheapest digital device that ever existed. But effective in terms of even creating virtual environments like this. And that was a really important part. And particularly through COVID, our students could go to Fiji, whether they had gone home to China or whether they were based in Wellington or whether they were based somewhere else. They couldn't leave their houses, but they could go to Fiji, meet up with each other and discuss the coursework. And that was a really powerful way of connecting the learners. And we have produced the Peru or the Machu Picchu Pueblo learning tool specifically for schools. So that's being rolled out into secondary schools, particularly in New Zealand, but also other countries have picked it up. And that's, I think, also an important role for us, that we add to education where we can, and we don't just think about what we can do for business school education. And one point before I hand back to you, Levent, is in my mind, it needs to be guided by pedagogy. Otherwise, it makes no sense. There are lots of technological gimmicks out there that are great, but pedagogy needs to be underlying it. And we used experiential learning, pedagogy that's been around for a long time in a situated sense, but really bringing that into the virtual space. And we feel it works. The students have enjoyment. We had so much talk about, complexity. It's in there because you have to tease things apart. You have to understand the tensions between economic, environmental, social, cultural impacts. And also that we want these people to become change makers. They become passionate about it.
Yeah. On that note, I totally agree with you, Christian, because without pedagogy, without knowing what the students want and how they want to learn, we're not going to create technological digital advances. That's not going to happen. So that we're leveled here, taking your classes from in-person to online is not digital transformation. That's a modality change. A lot of us think that's digital transformation. No, digital transformation is completely different. It's easy, hard. We can argue about it all day long, but it has to have other ways of teaching, not just taking from in-person to online. So Wharton Interactive was created with that mindset. Now, I've been using the word democratization. How do you democratize? I'm asking you. How do you democratize? What's the first thing we need to do when we democratize? Make it available and make it scalable. That's why we couldn't use VRs, and nothing against a beautiful idea connecting, because our simulations must have be used by everyone and anyone globally. The only thing they need is a laptop and a working internet. They don't need to download anything, and they don't need to do any additional buying equipment, etc. And that's where we want to democratize, where we can bring the latest know-how in a gamified version to the Gen Zs, millennials, the future leaders of the world, because that's where we need to make the change. The previous session said, when they asked students, they said something, innovation in learning. I think I'm talking about from my perspective, we are not connected to the students. We have to do it more, and that's where we need to make sure that innovation and learning is part of the curriculum in a way that we call it true digital transformation. You want to go into challenges?
Not yet.
Okay.
We still have 9 minutes.
All right. But I have a video too.
Yeah, good. But I also think we need to move away from always talking about teaching. Essentially, if there is no learning, we have achieved nothing. And it's, in my mind, and I sort of tried to bring that out, it's really important that we appeal to the diversity of learners that we have, and that we really help them translate information into learning. And that's not always a given. And I would like to think that I step back more and more and foster learning rather than teaching. And that's where the digital tools, I think, are so powerful, because students should, like in the geography tradition or geology or classics, you go on a field trip and you learn in the field. And then you make sense of that learning. And that's probably not that common in business schools, but I think there's a real place for it, and there's a lot of initiative. And if we can go out into the real world, great if we can. But I think we've learned there are so many shocks around us that keep happening that we need to be resilient to also be prepared. What happens if we can't go out into the real world? What are our tools?
I'm
challenges?
No. I'm going to write on that one.
Right.
So true. I think being able to, what you just said, being able to bring that and making sure that it's not teaching, it's learning, and what the role is going to be. For me, the more I look at it, the faculty should play the role of a facilitator, not a teacher. Because I'm going to say a word and everybody said, oh no, again. ChatGPT, AI. We're going to, this is not, we cannot stop this. We can regulate it. And this morning, EU just came up with the first AI regulations. So we're going to handle this in a way in terms of regulations. But the younger generation will use these tools. Ethan Malik is one of the first faculty in the world, who's our co-founder, created a syllabus saying it's compulsory to use ChatGPT in the classroom, rather than fighting with it. So we are not going to fight with this. We just need to know how to create this technology and provide additional learning tools with AIs, ChatGPTs, etc. The role of the faculty, universities, business schools are going to change. But so is the world is changing, and we need to take our parts on that.
Yeah, and I think we are also asked to think a little bit about the challenges. And I think the challenges are often, do we have time for this? Do we have time to innovate? Do we have time to innovate on the scale that we need to make it a comprehensive learning experience? Because if it's a little snippets, that can be good, and often that's the scaffolding into sort of a greater project. But I think that's where we go back to what Andy Hoffman was talking about. We need that systemic change where we're being rewarded for things that are not just publications. A good learning tool should be research driven and should be driven by pedagogy, but still the amount of time, the hundreds and hundreds of hours that it takes to develop this over time needs to be somehow recognized. And also the universities need to hire the people that have this ability and cannot just demonstrate that they can sit in a room for 10 hours a day, not come out and create a publication after 3 months. You know, that collegiality, the working together, bringing in the right people from the right disciplines. This is not so much just a business project. It's a project from lots of people. Teaching units are involved. So it is cross-disciplinary. And of course, there's also that question of ethics. How do you represent people? How do you represent culture? And that is a tricky one. And we opted in our learning tools not to create avatars, which is always the temptation to try and populate a space with avatars. But how do I do justice to a Peruvian from Machu Picchu Pueblo by representing them as an avatar? It's so problematic and contentious that we decided we're not going to go there. So unfortunately, the space seems a bit empty until you meet people that are video recorded. So they bring themselves into that conversation. They talk to the students, talk about themselves, and represent themselves. I completely step back. It's between the student and the community member that has that conversation.
I was going to talk about the challenges, but our time is dwindling here. Let me ask you a question. What do you think the biggest challenge we have from Wharton Interactive, a brand well-known, who wants to democratize education and wants to basically give away simulations to the whole world? Mindset, resistance to change. What is this? Unless we start looking at it from a positive perspective, where we change our mindsets, these things are going to take time. But the business world is changing, so we have to keep up with it. I want to make sure you have your closing remarks.
Yeah, just you can see this is very well rehearsed. Thank you. My key point would be, we heard about courage quite a bit, and I think that is really important that we step up as educators. We own our identity as educators and everything that involves, and that we also take some risks. And we can't have innovation without taking risks. There will be some failures, there will be some setbacks, but we owe it to our students, because otherwise they go out with a bit of a blah experience, and that doesn't help our university, but particularly it doesn't help them make the world a better place. And I'm relying on them to make a better place for me when I go into retirement. So I'll leave it there.
Good for you. I'm going to show you a video, and I have maybe another 30 seconds with some final words. Could we start the video, please?
Since the pandemic, we have seen a shift to digital transformation in education. However, there is still much innovation for digital transformation in the education and learning space. I have traveled all over the globe and seen the resistance to the change. The old way of teaching, the Socrates way, getting in front of the class, teaching the content, and trying to measure it by quizzes and exams persist. There is also a misconception that moving in-person learning into an online setting is called digital transformation. Well, not really. Digital transformation is more than just a modality change.
It's VR.
The first shift should start with a greater understanding of creating learner-centric programs and courses. Gen Z and millennials are digital natives and adapt easily to new digital tools. For the non-digital natives, I would add myself here, the challenges are obvious. However, instead of banning or limiting ChatGPT or similar tools, we must embrace and benefit from them. I always start my meeting by saying I am here because of my passion for democratizing education and transforming learning. That means going beyond traditional ways of teaching and learning and meeting learners where they are. Let's ensure we are ready to embrace the changes before it is too late.
Okay, that's me talking to you, but that's not what I'm saying here. I created this video using AI in 10 minutes. That's the last message I want to give you. Anybody can do it. We just have to adapt. Thank you very much.